Hello, everybody.
Hello.
And welcome to Issues in Focus, and a rather sad welcome to Issues in Focus this month because it's the last program in our year-long series. Is that sad?
It certainly is. The last one.
We hope you've enjoyed the programs in the series and that they've in some way helped you with your English, because of course our Issues in Focus program has been a part of NHK's English education series of programs, and today we are going to use this opportunity of the last program to talk about English education in Japan, because our program has been just one of the many ways in which you have the opportunity to improve your English or to learn English, to study English, if you want to. There are so many other ways, aren't there, Peggy? Sometimes it seems to me that there is a confusing number of ways, books, schools, materials, teachers, methods, programs by which people can try to help themselves improve their English.
There's a tremendous amount of time, energy, and money put into learning English in Japan. And of course, I know many Japanese who can speak English very, very well. But again, for all that energy and money that's put into it, so many Japanese cannot communicate in English.
Right, and you have to think also that the Japanese people that we know have probably spent at least 6 years, if they've been through the school system, having English classes of some kind or another during their school years, and then if they've gone on to university, they've probably had at least one more, perhaps 2 or 3 more years of English, and still, as you say, one looks at the result and wonders where all that effort, time and energy has gone, and that's really the issue we're going to focus on today. Well as there being all kinds of programs like ours and all kinds of materials to help you with your English, there are also very many private English schools in Japan. So many that, in fact, English is clearly big business here in Japan. We are looking here at some of these private conversation schools and also cram schools that have sprung up in Japan.
In fact, there are more than 400 large private cram schools and English conversation schools in the Tokyo area.
More than 400 just in the Tokyo area. That's a
Right.
very large number. What service do these schools provide for the people who go to them, Peggy?
Well, there seems to be a difference, at least. Many Japanese make the distinction between English learned in schools and English conversation that you
Right.
pay money
Right.
for. One thing is that, well, I really don't think that English conversation can be taught or can be really learned. It is true you can learn spoken English. You can learn skills for communicating. And this is what many people pay money to do.
Are you happy? Yes, I am.
What does that mean in Japanese?
Well, there we have some children learning to speak English with
Okay.
a native speaker of English. I was a bit surprised there that he also asked his student to speak in Japanese. That's a rather unusual thing for a teacher, at least at a conversation school, to do. But I wonder why these children are going to this school. They may be learning English in order to communicate in a way that they wouldn't at their ordinary junior or high schools that they'll be going to later on. But then on the other hand, they're going here with their parents' money, and I suppose...
I think they're going because their parents want them to go.
Why do their parents want them to go?
Well, probably they think exposure to English when their children are young will make it easier to learn English later. The problems with accent, problems with being shy or hesitant about using English will disappear if they start early enough.
I suppose that's true, and their parents presumably also have in the backs of their minds the idea that English is a very important pillar in the educational system in Japan as a whole, and that some sort of English proficiency learnt early on will help their child to go to a good school and later on to get a good job. And of course, the poor child is going on his equally poor parents' money, and so we have to a certain extent, respect the parents' decision there. Well, we are going to talk about the different kinds of English education available in Japan, also the different methods and aims of English education here. And to help us do that, we have two studio guests, and we'd like to introduce them to you. The first of them is Professor Ikuo Koike of Keio University. Hello, Professor Koike.
Oh, nice to meet you, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, thank you for coming. Professor Koike is, as I said, of Keio University, and he's also a member of the board of directors of the Japan Association of College Teachers, that is JASET.
And our second guest is Professor Dennis Schneider, who's a foreign lecturer in English at the University of Tokyo. His background is in applied linguistics, teaching English as a foreign language.
Thank you, Peggy. I'm glad to be with you today.
Thank you for coming. Well, I'd like to ask Professor Koike, we've just seen a lot of private conversation schools and private cram schools in Japan. Now, as we all know, Japanese students are supposed to learn English at junior high school and then later on at college and university. So why are these private cram schools and conversation schools so popular?
Well, actually, I don't know well, but...
You've never been to one yourself, have you?
Well, but I suppose that first of all, that the parents are very eager to let the children study English, because that the parents are very interested in speaking English, but when they are young, they are not so eager. They are not so good in English conversation. So from now on, Japan will be becoming a worldwide activity. We need a worldwide activity. So the parents expect the children to speak fluent. And besides, as Peggy mentioned, well, the children are better in speaking the natural pronunciation. When they are young, small kids.
Of course, Professor Schneider, a lot of adults spend a lot of money learning English conversation. What do you think is wrong with the English teaching in the schools, that people can't communicate with the English they learn in high school and college?
One point is the focus of the education. I think most of the language in the schools, language teaching in the schools focuses on grammar and translation, and often on very minute points, rather than the overall communicative ability that one needs to really speak the language. And other factors are the lack of time. It takes a long time to learn a foreign language, so to give the schools the credit, they don't have that much time, even over the 6 years. And so I think one of the reasons for the private conversation schools is more time in study, and another one is a different focus, kind of balance the curriculum, so to speak, between the two kinds of instruction.
Well, certainly when people look at English education here, they try to pinpoint what is wrong with it very often. Some of them, as you have done, Dennis, talk about the lack of time available in the public schools. Some of them talk about the inadequacy of the teachers themselves. Maybe the Japanese teachers feel embarrassed about being models of pronunciation themselves. And other people talk about the emphasis on grammar and translation instead of the emphasis on communication skills. And all of these points are probably valid. But again, many people have said that the really difficult problem, the most difficult problem in English education here, is the college entrance exam, and the way in which this important examination overshadows everything that happens in English education during the school years.
Here we have students who are coming in to take the standard first stage achievement test, which of course includes a section of English. They don't look very happy.
They look extremely unhappy. I was just going to say, they look as if they're on their way to a torture chamber, and maybe we could sympathize with them there. Peggy, this is although English is not actually supposed to be a compulsory subject in Japanese education. It is, in fact, one of the main pillars of the system, isn't it? And I suppose all of these people taking this exam feel that, to some extent, their future lives depend very, very importantly on what's going to happen during the next 2 hours.
Right. If they want to get into college, they must have proficiency at taking this English language test. But the question, of course, is this really English, real English? Have you looked at some of these tests?
I've looked very carefully at some of these tests, and I must say that some of my friends who are English or Americans have looked at this test too, and the first thing they've told me, quite honestly, is that if they sat it, they couldn't pass it, because, in fact, the English is often so unnatural. Of course, these tests are marked by a computer.
Right.
We've spent so much time on this Issues in Focus program talking about machines, Peggy. We might as well introduce a machine into this program too. These tests...
It is true that you need a test that many people can take at one time, that's fair to all, that can be corrected quickly, easily, and I think you're going to have some sort of give and take here when you make up an exam. But I'm concerned that it has to be an English exam. For example, why couldn't you take exams in other languages?
Well, that's a good point. I suppose one of the answers is that you would need to have very more teachers trained in other languages than you have at present, certainly nationwide in Japan. But I'd like to ask Professor Koike, because I know you have made a special study of the entrance examination and all the things that it involves. What kinds of things does that examination test? Is it really a good test of English?
Well, I think that generally speaking, right nowadays, the test itself is gradually better and better. But the problem is that, well, the listening comprehension test is not included.
It's not included.
Not
That's
included,
what I was going to
except for the very small number of the specialty courses of English literature, or English.
You mean special colleges would offer that after the first standard?
But the general universities generally do not request the listening comprehension test. But since we are, at least I think it's very important thing is the training of communication ability. So in order to do that, the listening comprehension test should be included as a part of entrance exam to the
Certainly, if the purpose of English education is to train people to communicate, no one would disagree with you. The listening comprehension, and also writing skills, the skill of writing an essay, the skill of being able to summarize, to write an outline of what you have read. These are important parts of communication. But so often it seems to me that the entrance test in particular, and to some extent the text material that is used in junior high schools and high schools too, are not really concerned with communication. They're concerned with memory, testing people's memory, how many words and prepositions in particular you can remember, and they're concerned with teaching or with testing people's IQ. And to this extent, I think perhaps English is being misused just as a means of testing these mathematical, mechanical procedures. I've said enough. Dennis, what do you think? You looked at the entrance exam too, and do you find any inadequacies in it?
Well, I agree with Professor Koike that it's getting better, but that it still doesn't approach the idea of really testing communicative ability. And of course, there's the constraint of wanting to grade it by computer, and it's very difficult to, well, it's impossible to grade composition, I think, by computer, essay writing. And so the questions on the exam which ask for something concerning a longer reading passage are an improvement over the ones that ask for some minute point of grammar or pronunciation. But so I would say, yes, it's improving, but it still has room, plenty of room to improve for the future.
We all agree with that. Well, Professor Koike mentioned the importance of teaching English for the purposes of communication, and we agree, I think. It does often seem that the test doesn't test communication, it tests some other mechanical kinds of procedures. But there are signs that things are improving, things are changing, and one of these signs is that increasingly Japanese high schools are making use of foreign teachers in their English classes. I think we have some film that shows some American teachers in Kanagawa Prefecture, Peggy.
Right. Since 1977, the Ministry of Education has invited English fellows to come as assistants to Japanese teachers. They teach in classrooms like we see here. They have regular contact with students, but they also hold seminars and help Japanese teachers improve their teaching skills.
Now, we're seeing a class in progress. Is this class part of the training to pass the entrance examination, or does the school and the teacher consider this a completely separate activity?
Most of these classes are within the standard school week, using the standard texts, part of the preparation for the exams.
Well, obviously, this is a step in the right direction. At least the students, whatever they're learning, they're getting contact with a native speaker.
And they're using English.
Yes.
They aren't learning about
Yes.
English. They're actually communicating in English.
That's such an important point, Peggy, that I'll risk boring everybody by repeating it. It's the difference between learning English and learning about English is something that is not thought too carefully about by a lot of teachers and educationalists here.
We talked more with these young fellows in Kanagawa Prefecture, asking them some of their opinions. What do you think of the English teaching you're seeing? Both the setup of the program and the actual response in your classrooms.
English in Japan is not taught as a language, in my opinion. It's taught, as I said, to get into the college. I mean, if you can pass the English section, you can go to college. So it's not a language, it's a difficult course to take. I think teaching it as a language would, encourage the students, and they'd be more interested to study if it was actually a language, if they could communicate in the daily classes, not just, listening and repeating, but actually using it. That's the thing that I'm disappointed about.
Yeah. When I was at the university, I studied American culture. And when I came here, I was really, really eager to share different points of American culture with Japanese students. But I find that especially the better the students are, the less I get to see them. Because the better students are preparing for the universities, and teachers won't invite me to their class because they don't want to waste time, speaking English instead of studying grammar. Whereas those are the students I love to talk to, because I can just tell them so many things about America and just be able to have a normal conversation with them. So I find that disappointing from a personal point of view.
Do you think the textbooks are adequate?
No. I think some of the stories are okay. One thing I really dislike is the grammar sections at the end. It's just almost useless. They don't have any kind of practice exercises. They have very short ones, but no repetition type things. So like one sentence changed to Japanese. That's a big problem. I think, although some of the stories are stereotyped, they're adequate, in my opinion. I don't know about the other ones.
Now, are the teachers expected to do a lot of practice drills to make up a lot of pattern practice?
Perhaps, but I tend to see a lot more translation and grammar work than pattern drills and practices. So,
do you think that's the way to teach English?
Well, I think you need a little bit of grammar and translation at some point, or you're never going to grasp the language. But, not every day for 50 minutes in your English class. There's a time and place for everything, and I don't think it takes 50 minutes of an English class.
When would you introduce translation? Maybe at the 3rd or 4th year?
If they're made to translate, then there's no need for the English part. They just go to the Japanese. And in high school, we never translated. If we had a problem, then the teacher would go and translate it for us. But he would never translate all of the material, just if there was something we didn't understand. And I think that's the best way to do it.
Whether all children should be learning English.
I really think they should be given more of a choice so that the students that want to learn English learn it well instead of trying to give everybody this much. You could give the students that really want to learn it that much.
Well, I think definitely they should have the option. But, you know, one of the nice things about learning a foreign language in the States is you take 2 years, generally, to get into college. You have 2 years of a foreign language. And after those 2 years, the students who aren't interested drop out. They don't stick with it. And the kids who want to actually learn the language, they stay with it. I stayed with it for 3 years, and my third-year class had 7 students in it. And I think that's an option that should be available to the students.
I was one of the dropouts. but